What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Therapy on Two Wheels. Today we're going to be talking about whether or not the BMW F800R is a good bike for taller riders. Let's jump into it. So is the BMW F800R a good bike for taller riders? For the most part, I would say yes, but it really depends on a lot of factors. First, how tall are you? For reference, I'm about 6'2", about 200 pounds, so I'm a little bit bigger than the average rider, which is probably somewhere between 5'9", 5'10", maybe 160, 170 pounds. And keep in mind, this is a naked bike, so more similar to a sport bike than a cruiser. You're not typically going to have a guy that's 6'10", 350 pounds on a bike like this, and you're probably also not going to have somebody who's 5 foot, 100 pounds on a bike like this. You're going to have somewhere in between kind of that average range, and if you fit that average range, this bike is going to be plenty fine for you. Now, in terms of ergonomics, you'll see that my knees are not too bent, but they do have a pretty good bend in them. I do have back, hip, and knee issues, so extended periods of time on this bike are not always the best for me. So it depends on a lot of factors: how you're going to be riding the bike, where you're going to be riding the bike, and if you do have any previous injuries. But with this bike, you do have a 31-inch seat height, so it is going to be great if you are a little bit taller rider. For me, at 6'2", my feet can flat foot when I come to a stop, no problem. There's even a little bit of a bend in my knee. If you are, let's say, 5'10" or under, you'll probably still be able to flat foot, if not close to it. So in terms of comfortability, when you are in stop and go traffic or you're in city traffic, you'll be able to put your feet down, stop, take off pretty easily. In terms of the seating position ergonomics, the BMW F800R does pitch you forward a little bit more similar to a sport bike rather than kind of a lean-backed cruiser style. So on longer rides, if you're a taller individual, depends on the comfortability of your seat as well, of how long you're going to be on this bike. The bike has a decent stock seat. That's what I have on here right now. I've ridden this bike for about 3 hours at a time. For the longest time I've been on it, it's probably about 90 minutes without getting off. At about that 90-minute mark is when everything kind of starts to hurt for me. If you're a smaller rider, you'll probably feel a little bit more spread out. Your knees won't be as bent. You won't have as much of a kind of a hunch in your back here. But for me, that is what these ergonomics do. For the hand position, it is a little bit wider than a lot of those sport bikes, especially a sport bike with little clip-on handlebars on the side. You're going to be much more hunched over, much more crouched in. With this one, they are a little bit wider handlebars, which makes it more comfortable for those longer rides for taller riders as well. If you are a taller rider and you've ever been on a smaller sport bike like a Ninja 300, you'll notice that you are fairly cramped up on that bike, and it almost looks a little bit more like a tway for you. Those are also much lighter too, so it is nicer if you're a shorter rider to be able to manage the bike. But if you're a taller, bigger individual, you don't necessarily need to have a 300-pound bike to make it manageable. This one's about 445 pounds wet weight, and for me at about 200 pounds, I say I'm an average build. I have no problems maneuvering this bike, in and out of my garage or in parking spots. When you're on top of the bike, it does feel very manageable. It feels very light as well, very nimble if I'm throwing this through any twisty curves. So for me, I would say I wouldn't mind having this bike on a probably 4 to 5 hour ride tops. If it's going to be longer than that, I'm going to be looking something more like a sport touring bike. This is kind of a step in between a sport and a sport tour. It does have more of those upright ergonomics. It does have the luggage rack on the back of it. It's got the pillion seat if you are going to be taking a passenger as well. So it does have some of those creature comforts. This one does have the heated grips with it. It's got adjustable suspension, stability control. It's got ABS. So it has a lot of those great things that you would need as a rider. So is this bike going to be good for you if you're a taller rider? I'd say if you're under about 6'5", 6'6", then yeah, this would be a great bike for you. It has enough space for those shorter rides that you're probably going to be taking on this type of bike, and it's comfortable enough to where you're not going to be hurting after 30 minutes of riding it. And then in terms of feet position, My feet are not feeling too cramped up. I can get my feet under the shifter peg on the left hand side just fine. I can reach the right rear brake just fine. So for me at my height, 6'2", about 200 pounds, about a size 12 shoe, this is a great fitting bike for me. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.